this panel, keeping it close to home, psychological thriller, domestic noir, I suspect you're here not only because you were either familiar with these fabulous authors' work, but because you dare to delve into the darkness of the mind and all the evil that we as human beings can possibly dream up, especially if it's with friends or with family. Well, that's where you take us. Please let me introduce you if you're not familiar with our authors. Furthest away from me, Louise Mumford, local Welsh author. Thank you so much, Louise, for all that you do. And
you make it sound like I do suddenly a lot.
You do. I know what you have done for this festival, so yeah. So thank you. 3 books so far, am I right?
2 published so
Two
far.
published.
The 3rd one is coming.
Yeah, I've had the delight for this festival of catching all these books that are due to come out, and the next one, because I'm going to talk to you mostly about that next one if I'm allowed. Yeah, and you had your break when you were spotted at the Prima Donna Festival. Could you just tell us what the Prima Donna? Because it's not like your way of being, is it? Because you're not are you a prima donna?
Oh, I'm a total prima donna, yes. No, I'm not. So the Prima Donna Festival is a festival in Suffolk, which was started actually by a group of women in the entertainment industry. Sandy Toxvig is one of them. And she, and then the whole group set up this festival. So I went along to do the workshops and the literary stuff, an aspiring writer. And of course, because you're an aspiring writer, you always carry your first 3 chapters and your synopsis and, you know, everything in your little bag. And I was lucky enough to meet the lady who runs my publisher, the HQ, and she read the whole thing and offered... Well, no, she didn't straight away offer him. She said, you've got a lot of work to do. And then when I did the work, she offered to publish it, which is good.
So doing that kind of thing of going to a festival like that, I mean, you said, you know, you carry your 3 chapters, you carry a synopsis. For anybody in the audience who might be thinking, what advice would you... I mean, how do you get into a festival like that?
You pay. Sorry, yeah, it is. Actually, no, that is flippant because you can have, there are tickets for the Prima Donna Festival which are donated and are given to people who have a lower income. So that was a little bit flippant. But you just do your research. I'd gone to lots of different festivals and tried to annoy many different agents and editors. I was just really, really determined and very ambitious without necessarily having a very realistic view of how long it takes to be published. I thought you could write a book and then get it published within a year. Yeah. No, you can't do that.
Did you have arranged face-to-face meetings then, or did you kind of follow them around with your waving your synopsis at them in the toilets? You pass it over the top of the cubicle.
You read this.
While you're occupied, why don't you just have a little peruse of this?
So it depends on the festival. The really nice thing about the Prima Donna Festival was that you could just have chats with these amazing women.
Yeah.
And so Lisa, who's the executive publisher of HQ, she just did these little one-to-ones and just wanted to talk to people and find out what people were writing.
Yeah.
Because she gets sent a lot of what agents think she wants to read. And it was quite nice of her to decide what she wanted to read. So you do have to be really determined and you do have to keep going. I think every author who's published, it's resilience that gets them there.
Absolutely.
That resilience, I'm going to talk to Mark about that resilience. Because Mark Edwards, I read author of over 14 books.
Yes, I was just trying to count them when you said how many Louise had written, because I can't remember how many.
Yeah, I mean,
I think Keep a Secret is my 13th solo book, or maybe 14th. I can't remember. And then I wrote 6 with Louise Voss as well.
Yeah.
And then there's several novellas, and it just gets a bit confusing because all the co-written books and the novellas and the
But that is, again, in a sense, I'm glad you're on this panel, but you could have been on the previous panel that I was chairing about a life in crime, thinking about, that long-running ability to write.
I know.
Yeah.
I'm a veteran now.
And we should say, because you've been topping the bestseller lists since your debut in 2013, yeah?
Yeah, well, I mean, it actually goes back a bit further to 2011 when I was writing with Louise, and we wrote a couple of books together called Killing Cupid and Catch Your Death, and they both did really well on the Kindle charts. That then led to a book deal with HarperCollins, and then I self-published The Magpies in 2013 before signing with Thomas & Mercer, my current publisher.
But I am again, I think you never know what is going to happen in the book world, the life of a writer, to think that you do that self-publishing, and it's that self-publishing that people pick up on that.
And that was
work.
15 years into me trying to be a writer. So I wrote my first book in the early 90s when I was in my 20s, when I just graduated from university. And it took until 2011 to get my first book deal. Wow. So there was a lot of books written and kind of cast aside. And one of those books, because I wrote The Magpies in 2000 originally, and it kind of went to acquisition at some publishers, and it never quite got through that meeting. And then it sat in a drawer. Well, in fact, it sat in my girlfriend's Gmail account for something like 13 years before I edited it and published it, and then it went on to sell hundreds of thousands of copies.
Is it, do you think, because often, every writer has a story with regards to when they get picked up, when books see the light of day. I wonder to what extent are stories for a certain time, and they don't get picked up immediately. It needs that time for then a story to come out and then be. Do you think that was the case?
Well, I like to think I was ahead of my time. Yes.
Definitely.
No, I think there is something in that. I think that to get published, you kind of have to be in the right place at the right time with the right book, or in front of the right person on the right day with the right book. And if you don't get those three things all line up, then you've just got to keep trying, because eventually those three things will align.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. You have to keep going, because it's so easy to get just your first lot of rejections and think, oh well, that's it. I'm never gonna. Even with one book, or try, write again, write something else, write better, do something different, but always do the stuff that you like writing. Don't try to write to a market as well, because the market will have moved on by the time you've got to publication. I
think with me, what happened was that I kept getting encouragement. So people kept saying nice things, and that kept me going. I think if some Simon Cowell figure had said to me 10 years ago, well, it's not worth it pursuing this dream, then I might not have carried on. But because I was always getting positive feedback, and it's always not quite right.
It's not quite for us. That's the phrase. It's not quite for us.
Yeah, or we've got something similar on our list. That's a very common one that you get as well.
I don't feel strongly enough to support it, or something like that.
But I think you have to look at this a bit like relationships, that who wants to be with somebody who doesn't actually want you?
Oh, yeah.
And that fit. But anyway, we won't.
This is
not therapy.
It's not therapy.
Let's start crying about our relationship.
But we have this psychological element, and I just, we're there for the thrillers aspect. Not that,
it is true that you do, when you find the right publisher or the right editor, then it's a really important relationship, and you've both got to be as enthusiastic as the other one. The other partner. Thank
you. So when we talked before, when this panel came into being, should apologise as well that if anybody's here to see C.L. Taylor, Callie, sadly, unfortunately, she wasn't feeling well enough to travel, and she did send apologies, and so thinking of her. But we thought the notion of leaving things behind and returning home or coming back, because both of you were in what you've now been writing, you've taken either a step away from something or a returning, and I'd like to visit that a little bit later. But first of all, in psychological thrillers, domestic noir, I'd like to know, two lovely authors as yourselves, what drew you to that murky aspect of crime fiction? And what is it that you most relish because of what the psychological thriller, the domestic noir, will allow you to do with a text?
You go
So
first.
why and what do you enjoy? Not just you go first.
I love it. I just want to make it clear that I'm an absolute delight, okay? I'm really, really nice. However, I do have a darker side. I just wrote the story. When I wrote Sleepless, which I wrote in 2018, and thought that it would take a year to get it published, I just wrote the story that I wanted to write. So I had this idea about this girl who couldn't sleep, which was obviously me, and that she then takes up the offer of this sleep trial and it promises to fix her sleep. So it then became a thriller because that's what the story had to be. So then I fell into the crime fiction world, which I love. It's a brilliant world to be in. The thriller world is fantastic because you can pretty much, I was talking about this earlier in a different panel, you can pretty much write anything within the crime fiction world. If there's some sort of crime, some sort of dark deed, you're there, you're in the crime fiction world. So I've thoroughly enjoyed it, but I never set out to be a thriller writer. But I do very much enjoy being able to explore that darker side. I definitely wouldn't be a romantic comedy writer because I don't. All of those storylines to me would become dark. Or the characters would end up just taking the mickey out of each other all the time. So yeah.
Or murdering each other.
Which is not a romantic comedy. That's something totally different.
A romantic tragedy.
Romantic tragedy.
There's a theme developing on this. Yeah, I'm very similar. That I didn't really. I mean, I thought when I started out and when I was writing The Magpies that I was writing horror, psychological horror.
Because I see I don't see him in you, but I see the elements of Stephen King.
Yeah, and he was my biggest influence, and I wanted to write stuff like that, but without having any of the supernatural elements. So things like Misery by Stephen King would be a big influence, and it was only kind of when I had to think more. So you write the book, and it was only when I was thinking about getting it published and thinking more commercially that I kind of thought, this is a psychological thriller or psychological horror. And since then, I very much embraced the fact that I write psychological thrillers. And I think that I've always been a fan of dark stuff. When I was a kid, I loved reading like science fiction comics like 2000 AD and things like that, and my mum used to let me stay up late at night and watch Hammer House of Horror and Death Wish on TV and things like that, and brought home James Herbert books from the library, like The Rats and The Fog. And so
Clive
I was
Barker.
That was late. That was when I was a teenager. But I was drawn to very dark stuff from when I was a kid, and if I try and write something lighter, I just don't really feel it. There has to be that darkness in there.
So if we stick with the darkness, and again, it doesn't matter which book, and we don't need to say which book because to not give things away, but I wonder, what is the most disturbing thing, if we're talking darkness, what is the most disturbing thing you have ever had one of your characters, so not yourself personally, one of your characters do? And you surprised yourself that you sent them
that's hard.
so far.
Hang on.
Well, shall I go while you're thinking?
Yeah.
So I know that my book, Follow You Home, is probably my darkest book, and my editor at the time told me that when she read it, it made her feel so horrified and kind of sick that she had to get off the train that she was on to go and take a breather because it was so it's set in this forest in Romania, and this couple get chucked off a train in the middle of nowhere, end up having to kind of walk along these train tracks to try and find the nearest town, and they see something terrifying in the woods, and I actually wrote the first like 30 or 40% of that book without knowing what they'd seen. But I'd hyped it up so much in the book.
You're like, I'll get to that later.
Exactly. So I was like, I need to come up with something really, really strong and really, really scary. And I'm not going to give away what it is, but what the thing that they see in the house that they come across in the woods is, I mean, I actually made myself, normally I'm not at all affected by what I write, because it's just, I'm kind of crafting it. I'm not really psychologically affected by it, but I was quite affected by that book.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing that. Yeah. Has it given you a chance to think?
Yes. I've thought of something now, desperately. No, it's actually the end of one of my books, and I had a lot of trouble ending this book. So because I wanted the grim ending, the not very optimistic ending, but what a lot of readers like, and obviously that's fair enough, is that they want the ends neatly tied at the end of a book. And the way the book ended, it doesn't neatly tie those ends because the story demands it. So I kind of stuck to my guns, and I stuck with the grim ending. But it does kind of stick with you because it's not that crime fiction ever has a happy ending, but it's all kind of neatly tied, and this one really isn't.
Yeah.
It kind of seeps kind of out. You know, it's got a little life of its own after the ending, and that was quite disturbing. And it was also, I think it was a good lesson in, because I don't stick to my guns if I can understand that my editor is right.
Yeah.
But it was also a nice lesson in believing my gut instinct that's how the story had to end.
Yeah, I love books with slightly open endings where there's something, you know, like at the end of Halloween where she looks down on the lawn and he's gone. Things like that where you're like, it's going to carry, there's the story's going to carry on. And so I'll get lots of emails saying, but I need to know what happened after. And I'll say, well, I want you to use your own imagination as to what happened next. And I personally really like reading books that make you think beyond the last page. So I always try and come up with a little bit of an the main crime is solved, but there's something, there's still a bad guy out there or something.
Well, that's the thing, the story, the bad guy was so bad that my puny little heroines couldn't completely overcome that.
Okay.
Thank you so much. So, to these books that are due out soon. Louise, yours is The Hotel. When can we get our mitts on The Hotel?
You can have it in ebook on the 22nd of June and paperback the 17th of August. Those dates can always move, though.
Of course, but June and August we're looking at. That's great. Okay, so I read at the back in those acknowledgements that when you said, I will never not find it weird to have the story that for so long has only been in my head exist as an actual book that people can read. So how long was The Hotel roaming around before it actually took life?
I have a terrible habit of offering my editor, because once you finished a book, your editor immediately goes, so what's your next book going to be? And they want a synopsis. And I'm rubbish at that because I'm terrible at writing a synopsis. I don't know where my stories go. And I have a horrible habit of combining about 3 books into one. So it's going to be this with a little bit of this and a little bit of that. And then my editor goes, no, you can't have all of those things happening. So I had the main idea of the 4 teenagers going to this hotel. And then I added in a load of other stuff that had to be taken out. So that main bit I had for quite a while in my head. And I've always wanted to write about a creepy ruined hotel.
What's the elevator pitch?
Oh, the elevator. See, I haven't sorted my elevator pitch for this one. Don't do that to me.
Sorry, I don't know what it's about.
God.
So
it's
like about some teenagers.
And the publisher's going, so what's your book
Okay,
about?
you got 10 seconds. Sell it to me.
So it is basically about 4 teenagers who go and film at this old abandoned hotel. One of them goes missing. 10 years later, they have to go back to that hotel and find out what really happened to their friend, Leo Finch.
So it's an abandoned hotel?
Yes. Yeah, a creepy hotel on the Welsh coast. And I've always wanted to write about creepy hotels.
That sounds right up my street.
But they go there to film, don't they?
Yeah.
That's the notion.
It's like a found footage kind of thing.
Yeah, found footage, dark tourism. They just go to their film studies students, so that they want to do a bit of filming. In the process, one of their friends disappears, and then the film becomes a massive success. And the film company wants them to go back and film this reunion show.
Oh, that sounds really good. I really like that idea.
Yeah. I was inspired by the Friends reunion.
Oh, yes, of course.
Because everyone was totally... it seemed the whole world was absolutely fascinated by everything these people did in that hour.
Yeah.
Isn't it? Like, Jennifer Aniston hugged David Schwimmer. And it's like, are they together? Are they not together? What's happening? And I just love that idea of, people under the spotlight like that.
But none of them went missing, did they, in their reunion?
The friends, not that I know of.
Well, yeah.
Matthew Perry didn't look like he was always kind of in the room.
Always present, for whatever reason that might be, Thanks, Louise, for that. I want to come back and ask some more about those teenagers and their doings at the abandoned hotel. Keep her secret, though, the idea of people coming back. So shall we turn the tables on? Mark and
pitch.
say,
Come on,
yeah,
Mark.
okay. So it's about a man who starts going out with his old college girlfriend, and they go on holiday to Iceland when they've just been back together a couple of weeks. She almost falls off the edge of a cliff. Well, she does fall off the edge of a cliff, but is kind of hanging. So chapter 1 literally ends with a cliffhanger. And while she's hanging there, thinking that she's going to die, she basically blurts out that she deserves it and that she deserves to be punished. And then she tells him, when they're back at the hotel, that she's got this secret, and she tells him what it is, this thing that she did. So that happens very early on in the book. What they don't realise is that somebody else is listening in, who then turns up with the intention to blackmail her. So my main character has to decide what to do. Is he going to help her protect this secret?
Keep her secret,
Yes, and so they basically get into more and more trouble. Everything they do leads to more and more complications and more trouble, and it just gets increasingly, they get panic-stricken and dig themselves deeper and deeper into this hole.
Yeah. I love this kind of stories, though, where you watch two people kind of just disintegrate, don't you? They just
the unraveling of it.
It just unravels,
Yeah, because that relation, it obviously puts. They've only just got together. They have this kind of. I was really inspired by those old kind of noir films like Double Indemnity or Bonnie and Clyde, things like that, where you have this couple who get into a lot of trouble together, and have to try and get out of it. And things like A Simple Plan. Have you read that or seen that? Where someone has this secret and it just creates chaos in their lives. So it was really good fun to write. Really good fun.
Both of you, from what you're telling us about these books that you do, when is Keep a Secret?
So it's out on May the 30th.
Yeah, even less time to wait. But again, you give us the notion of, should you ever go back? Whether that be go back to a place or go back to a person, that there seems to be danger.
Yeah, yes. I mean, it's not really, in a lot of my books or a lot of crime books in general, you have characters who have this dark secret in their past, something they might have done like 20 years ago, and their actions in the present lead to this secret being exposed, or somebody comes back to haunt them. It's not really like that. It's about something that's happened very, very recently. But so Matthew is the main character, and Helena is his girlfriend, and she was kind of like the one who got away. Obviously, if he didn't meet up with her again, then none of all this terrible stuff that happened.
We couldn't have had the adventure on the page.
Exactly, yeah.
I have to say one thing that I really learned from it, though, if you are a hill walker, climber, anything like that, the need for a good, sturdy rucksack strap.
Oh, yeah, essential.
Essential.
It's the strap that saves her from falling. To her.
Yeah.
And so when I was writing this book,
Did you test any rucksack straps?
Well, I was so I had so I put a rucksack on and I was trying to like angle it onto the banisters of my stairs and work out if I could hang. And then I was like,
doing,
but I
darling?
couldn't. Yeah.
Just hanging from the banisters.
And then that didn't work. So I got a Chris Pratt doll. You know, like Chris Pratt from Jurassic Park.
Yes.
And various other things. My son had a Jurassic Park doll, or Jurassic World rather, doll of Chris Pratt, and I tied a little kind of makeshift backpack round him, and then I hung him from various hooks and things to try and work out whether he would be saved if he fell down onto this cliff.
Your research
Very
is
scientific.
admirable. I love it.
Scientific.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. So Chris Pratt helped me a lot.
Scientific with a touch of Blue Peter. He's one I made earlier. No.
I was getting the whole family to join in with this as well.
Yeah, thank you. Anyway, back to the darkness.
Sorry.
It was getting far too light. They say that good psychological thrillers, domestic noir will throw in as well, that it's all about the tension, the building of the tension. I think, Mark, in what you're telling us about, how far is this couple going to go before that tension?
Yeah, before it snaps.
So, are you writers that are natural when it comes to creating the tension, or are you very aware that it's not happening and I need to bring it in there? Louise, what do you...
I think it's different in different parts of the story. So the flashback bits that I did with the main characters called Bex and her group of friends, that was really easy because I had already in my head the kind of points that I knew that was going to happen. I knew that was going to happen. And so it was quite easy to do that. It was a bit harder with the reunion show around it because obviously you've got to, it's a different dynamic really, because going back to what you were saying about going back to the past, in my book, each character views that past and that trip in a very different way, and it's all of those, they've all got a different little bit of knowledge, and when you fit it all together, it works out the story then of what actually happened to Leo. But because of that, that's creating the tension, because they all don't trust each other. They all think they know something about that night that, of course, they do or don't. I can't give it away. And so that tension was a little bit harder to weave through. And also, I stupidly gave myself a very important object. And then you've got to keep track of that blinking object all the way through the book. I actually had almost like a little kind of, I had to write down where the thing was in each chapter.
So tracking the object.
Because it's also quite small as well. And who had it and who didn't have it and who saw it and who didn't see it. And yes, I'm never using an important object again.
I had that in one of my books, right? It was a bottle of aftershave that kind of wrote...
mine's a lighter. It's the
roams,
stupidest thing,
And it was really important to make sure that this was in the right place at all times. Creating tension, I mean, it's different with every book, but I think with Keep Her Secret, it was just about making sure that every time they felt like they were getting close to finding a solution or fixing things, something else went wrong, or something that they did created another problem. It's just that kind of ripple effect all the time, and making sure it's kind of fast-paced and taught, and that there's no kind of fat in the book, that it's there are no boring bits, basically. I think that's the challenge.
Do you write it chronologically then? Because is that easier to do if you're writing it chronologically? Or do you chop and change scenes?
Yeah, well, it kind of, I mean, there's so many drafts, but generally I'll write it as people would read it.
Yeah.
So but then there are various flashbacks and things within that. So
Yeah.
the timelines are kind of moving around.
Because I find it quite easy to spot where the story's lagging when I'm writing it, because I've got bored. You know, it's like I need something to
if you
to
find
happen
yourself
now,
bored, then you
Yeah.
definitely know you should cut that
something's
bit.
got to go. Yeah. Even if it's the best writing ever, it's still got to go.
Yeah, kill your darlings,
Yeah.
as they say. Yeah. But I don't know. I mean, I don't think any of it is it natural? I don't know. It's about building your craft and honing your craft, and hopefully the more books you write, the better you get at it.
Thank you for the beautiful segue, because you take me back to the magpies. That was really,
Okay.
yeah. So 10 years on,
Yeah.
and I just wondered I mean, have you planned celebrations for the
Yeah.
success of that book, and if you can share with us what they are?
Well, I've kind of the anniversary of the publication of the Magpies was at the end of March or the very beginning of April. So I had like a big party on my Facebook page, and
There was swag.
there was lots of swag.
Yeah.
Did you get any?
I've
No,
got
I
some.
didn't get any swag.
I've got
No.
some with me. So if anyone wants a signed book afterwards, I've got some pens and things.
Yeah.
And I launched the paperback of this, because I wrote 2 sequels to the Magpies as well, but they'd only ever been an e-book, an audio book. So I published the paperback of those as well with a new short story, and put that out and sold lots of copies of that directly to my sort of most loyal readers. So that was really good fun. And I just like I've got a really good community on my Facebook page, and I do quite a lot of parties and things and videos and the same people, or some of the same people who came to the first one 10 years ago, when it was literally just there wasn't any video, it was just typing. It was like
It's like a chat room.
Yeah, well, it was just on Facebook, but there was no Facebook
no
Live
video,
at that
was there? Oh,
point.
right,
no,
right.
so I mean, there was photos,
Right.
but it was mainly just sitting there answering people's comments, like typing like a mad person. It was like CFAX before the internet or something.
I loved CFAX.
And yes,
Did
I've
you
got
go back
loyal.
to the text? Have you revisited?
It is
have
all
you
still there.
changed?
Still there.
No, the book for the Magpies. Have you revisited the text? Is there anything you would change 10 years on?
Oh God! Well, I think I would always go back and want to rewrite certain bits of any books, and you just have to not think about that.
You've just not done it yet. You've
Yeah.
purposefully not done it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the premise being the neighbours from hell.
Yeah.
Yeah. Everybody who's
Oh,
not
yeah.
read the books, and this might be a little personal. So if it is, just make up a story, because you're both creative. but I'm just thinking, you know, that experience of living next door to people who you wouldn't maybe have chosen
Yeah.
to have, and I just wondered.
Was it based on real? No, it was. Because I'm from Hastings originally, and when I left university, I lived in a ground floor flat with my then girlfriend, and the couple that lived downstairs from us basically tried to make our lives a misery. They hated having anybody living above them.
Yeah.
And
Which begs the question why they bought a ground floor flat.
Well, they were in the basement flat, or the garden flat, as they insisted on calling it. And they were just awful. They would send us hoax parcels. They would send us like really horrible letters.
Oh, wow.
They'd put cigarette butts under our door. They would kind of, if I wasn't there, this guy was like a huge guy. He'd come up and like try and intimidate my girlfriend. And yeah, they would. And when I moved out, I thought, what would have happened if it had got much, much worse?
Yes,
Like, what would I have done? And that was the initial spark of the book.
Yeah.
And as far as I know, they might even still be there. They're like the trolls who live under the bridge, kind of trying to
still roaming around. And they're
tormenting people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks, Max. Thank you. I wanted to ask you this because I'm intrigued. The hotel. Yeah, I was going to call it the hospital. I always mix up hotels and hospitals.
Okay, that's the fourth one. You've sorted that out for me.
Yeah, there you go. Did you create this place? Is it a place that has, you know, that's based on anything in reality? Or did you do a little fusion of things?
Yeah. There's an actual hotel called the Cliff Spa and Hotel, which is on the Pembroke coast, Cardigan Bay. So Poppet Sands, just up above from Poppet Sands. And it's a fantastic hotel. It's had quite a long history. And at one point in the 1800s, it was bought out. And it was the idea that it was going to become the new Brighton. The Pembrokeshire coast was going to be the new Brighton. But not really much ever came of that, apart from the one hotel. So I took that idea and created the hotel myself. I made I made up the building in my head. And I just threw everything that I loved about old buildings into it. So it's got a maze, a creepy maze, love a creepy maze. It's got a little turret bit, it's got doors that lock themselves and all that sort of stuff. All the horror gothic-y stuff that I've loved.
Quite Shining-esque.
I get to put it all into this place.
Did you go for research purposes? Did you have some time there?
Well, I did go to many hotels, not creepy ruined ones, because that would be odd, to just stay in those. But I think every hotel classes as an expense now, doesn't it? Because I've written a book called The Hotel.
Yeah.
Oh,
So
yeah.
I can say to the taxman, no, that actually, I can claim against that.
I think creepy abandoned building, I just love the idea of them. Those kind of urban explorers who go out and explore old asylums and things like that, or hospitals.
We've got an asylum where I live. There's an asylum just up
an
the road,
abandoned one,
conveniently. And it's one of the people go in and they do the filming and they do pictures, and this is what the basement was like and all that sort of stuff. It's fantastic.
In Hastings, there was an abandoned children's hospital, and they had if you walk past it, there'd be old teddy bears and dolls propped up in the windows looking out at the street, and it was absolutely chilling.
Are you people that sense things, or whether that be that there is something to sense, or that your fabulous imaginations allow, create that sensations?
You mean supernatural things?
Yeah, or just
all the
vibrations,
kind of things,
or
bad things have happened here.
Yes, and you can feel them.
Do you go on? You go first.
Well, I don't really believe in any of that stuff. But I don't know. I think that maybe there is a kind of energy that might be left behind by terrible things happening. But yeah, I don't really believe in ghosts or things like that. But I do find the kind of tropes of horror really interesting, but to be able to come up with a rational explanation for why those things happening is the challenge.
Yeah, because I think that's what you've really wanted to do, isn't it? That it not have that supernatural element.
Yeah.
Or it might seem to have, but there is.
Exactly, yeah. There has to be a logical, rational explanation for everything at the end. Even though I really personally love watching horror movies
I love ghosties, ghoulies. I'll watch anything like that.
Yeah.
But I always think human beings are much scarier
than
any ghosty or ghoulie.
I think my books are kind of explanation of the awfulness of people.
Yeah. And I think that does seep into, buildings. I think they do have an energy, and I think if they've kind of absorbed all of that very negative human energy, I think there is some sort of feeling there. I don't feel it myself.
No, I mean, I imagine if you went to Fred West's old house, you'd probably feel a bit of
but how much
negative
of
energy.
that is what you know?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, if you didn't know it was
If
Fred
you didn't
West's
know,
house.
Would you be
I mean, that's
oblivious
obviously
to-
a great topic for a book, isn't it? If you move into a serial killer's house without knowing,
Would you even?
Would
you feel it? And
And
if
you
you
see,
were
I
sensitive,
find the very new build houses creepy because there's a brilliant Hilary Mantel book, Beyond Black.
Yeah.
And she sets it as a horror book almost, but it's in a new build estate because they're soulless. There's nothing there, and these spirits move in with her and kind of take root because there's no other energy to combat them.
that sounds like the new Evil Dead film.
Oh, does it? Maybe they've been reading a bit of Hilary. Who knows?
Yeah.
Now, we've got about 15 minutes left. So again, audience, if you have questions, we'll be asking you. But I've got a couple of questions while people might think of their own. And it's a really simple one, Louise, to start with, or not to start with this bit section now. 4 young people. Why 4? It could have been 3, a magic. It could have been 5, but you went for 4. What was special about 4?
I needed to get rid of one, which means I had to have quite a few left. So that was 3, and I could possibly only come up with 4 to start off with. And also, they needed to fit in a boat. So 4 was probably about the top, so I could get in there. So yes,
Practical.
4.
Practical.
And you've mentioned Bex and Leo.
Yes.
So, I mean, I wonder, could you give us a small potted idea of the 4 people?
Oh no, you're doing this to me again, right? Okay. Right. So we've got Bex, who is she's kind of the final girl stand. You know, she's that kind of stereotype. You've got Rich, who's very much the kind of handsome, you know, perfect one. He's kind of the one that the girls swoon over. You've got Oscar, who's his best friend, not as handsome, bit in his shadow. The boy who stayed with the boat because he didn't go up the steps with them. He didn't go into the hotel. So he's always in the conventions trying to sell T-shirts and stuff, and you know, hawking tat because he wants the attention. And then Leo, who is the lovely, sweet-faced, you know, baby of the bunch who goes missing. So
was
Leo is a man or a woman?
Leo is a boy. Yeah.
So it's 3 guys.
It's 3 guys and a girl.
Okay.
Yeah.
And was he marked for death from the outset with you?
Yes.
Or disappearance?
Yes, unfortunately, Leo was, yeah. And I think that's why I made him so nice, because nice people have to die. they can't possibly be that nice. You know, they have to go. So, yeah, he would have been boring to write in the book. He would have been too good.
Yeah. So he had to be out.
He had to go.
Yeah. And Mark, I wanted to ask you about Iceland, a place that I'm very fond of. But you could have sent this couple all around the world, but you decided that yeah.
Well, I mean, I'd like to come up with some really deep, meaningful kind of answer to this, but the reality is that a few months before I started writing it, I'd been to Iceland Noir, the festival. And I thought that would be a great place to set the start of this book. So I wanted them to be hiking somewhere.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it could have been up Snowdonia or somewhere, or the Scottish Highlands, or in fact. So when I originally conceived this book, it was going to be New Zealand because the inspiration for this book came from something that actually happened to a friend of mine who was hiking in New Zealand on her own, and this happened to her. She fell down she calls it a crevasse, I don't know if that's the right word, but she kind of fell into a gap between these rocks and her backpack hooked on a rock, and if it hadn't, she would have died. And so she was completely on her own, and she's stuck kind of hanging with her backpack hooked on a jagged piece of rock, and was able to kind of haul herself out and get back to civilization. Wow. And when she came home, she told us this story, and I was like, that is a great opening to a book. And that was and I saved it for 5 or 6 years before I came up with the story that it would fit into.
And so, because I'm always intrigued by people's choices, but you shifted it.
Yeah, I did. I suppose New Zealand was going to be too far geographically, and I wanted it to be just they kind of go off on the spur of the moment. They go off to Iceland.
Yeah.
And that kind of was mashed together with another idea that I had of somebody who's got this secret, and somebody turns up and tries to blackmail them, and they have to do something drastic to stop the secret getting out. I think you were saying you have ideas for like 2 or 3 books, and you kind of mash them together. That's what happened with this one. It was ideas for 2 or 3 different novels that came together into this one.
And the size of your books, okay, because for you, we talked about having to slim it down, that there can't be any fat. Yeah. So are you good at getting to where it needs to, or do you need to do a lot of, you mentioned, Louise, that you needed to cut away.
Yeah.
A lot of stuff.
So I need to cut away a lot of my ideas. my poor agent and my editor, they just get bombarded with all, I could do this, and then I could add that, and then I could do that, and then aliens, and you know, all that sort of stuff. But when I'm writing it, I pretty much always hit, it's about 85, 90,000 words.
Yeah, same.
And I kind of just always hit it naturally, which is quite encouraging, because you feel like you're on the right track then.
Yeah. As a reader, I like short books. I wish there were more short books in the world. I feel like there's been this trend towards novels getting fatter and fatter as time has gone on. Whereas you used to be able to publish a 20 or 30,000 book and call it a novel, not a novella.
Well, Carrie, Stephen King.
Yeah, that's really short.
That's really short, isn't it? Yeah.
And something like A Clockwork Orange or something.
Yeah.
I mean, really, a book that you can read in a couple of hours.
Yeah.
God, I would love that. I would get through a lot more of my TBR pile if they were shorter.
Yes, can author friends just keep it?
Yeah.
But there is a. I think people like to feel they're getting value for money.
Yes.
Yeah.
Shall we ask the audience?
Yeah.
Is that all right?
Yeah.
Please, would you have questions for the authors? Yeah, thank you.
We're slightly dazzled by the lights up here, so you can't really.
The footlights, yeah. You should now be doing your running around the furniture.
Hi, great panel. I would like to know whether you read your reviews, and if you do, could you share with us a review that was particularly memorable, either because it was very good or because it was very bad?
You can choose. You have it, yeah.
Well, go on, you go first. I've got a good one.
Okay, right. So, I mean, you can read hundreds of reviews, which are lovely. The bad ones are always going to stick in your head. So I would just like to make the point, I have had some good reviews. But the one that sticks in my head was when I read on Goodreads. I don't read Goodreads anymore.
Stay away from
It's a terrible place.
And it was just 1 star. I think they probably, if they could have taken some
Chip
more,
away at
chipped a bit off that star, they would. And it was, the word, why do I read this stuff? And that was it. That was the whole thing. And I was like, well, actually, I thought to myself, well, if you hadn't, both of us would have been happier if maybe you hadn't have read this stuff. But, luckily, you obviously don't respond to bad reviews because that is their right as a reader.
There's a really good book coming out soon called The Last Word about a guy who tracks down a woman who's written a bad review and basically torments her.
Real life, hasn't it?
Yeah.
The criminologist who tracked down the person who gave him a bad review.
Yeah. There was another incident where somebody attacked a woman in a supermarket because he tracked her down to where she lived and hit her with a bottle of wine in a supermarket because she left him a bad review on Goodreads.
I just want to make the point, I wouldn't do that. You're quite safe.
Yeah. So I've got 2 which are quite funny. They're very short. One of them was, if you've got a sensitive disposition, cover your ears because it's quite rude. The headline was Floppy Dogs Crack, and the review was Rimming My Dog is more exciting than this book. And that was the Magpies.
Okay.
And the other
very specific as well, isn't it?
I know.
Thoughts gone into that.
Yeah.
I know, and the other one that always made me laugh, which was a typo, was this book groped me from the first page. Reaching the parts that other authors cannot reach.
Yeah, and animal parts.
Animal
as well,
parts,
yeah.
isn't it?
Yeah.
Just riffing a little bit off that great question. Would you prefer it with that old adage that if you've nothing nice to say, don't say anything at all? Do you think that's how reviewers should?
No, do you know what? I can say a sentence. Hold on. I think being a teacher for such a long time and having actual face-to-face children tell me my lessons were boring, do we have to do this again? I think it's your right as a reader. You can leave a bad review. That's fine. And it's my choice to read that bad review. So, I think if you're only getting good reviews, you're not reaching enough readers, perhaps.
Yeah.
I think you need to be reaching more,
Yeah, the books that kind of sell lots tend to get more 1-star and 2-star reviews as well.
Yeah,
so.
and you're not going to please all the people all the time.
Yeah, I mean, that's
I
impossible,
actually personally think that the best books are the ones that divide people's opinion.
Yeah.
So if you get a book that gets lots of 5-star reviews and lots of 1-star reviews.
Sarah Pinborough's Behind Her Eyes is a brilliant
And
example.
often the most commercial and most successful books are the ones that really divide people's opinion and get people debating about them and talking about them. Everything that a book that just gets loads and loads of 4-star reviews is a bit boring.
Yeah.
So I think it's good to divide opinion.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
That debate is good. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Hi, you both seem like really nice, normal people. But
It's a
I've
good
read
act.
your books, and I remember Louise talking about nailing babies to a wall in Brighton on Crime Northern Special. So where does the darkness come from?
Okay, right. I need to just
I
explain
think you do.
this bit. And this was we were doing the Trevor Woods. What is it?
Oh, whose crime is it anyway? Yeah.
So to make up a story on the spot, it's 5 crime writers, and we're asked questions and we make up this story. And I did come up with nailing. I don't think were they babies or were they dolls? I think they were dolls. I'm going to go with dolls. And now, trying to defend myself, I've forgotten what the question was.
Wait.
Where does the darkness come from?
Well, 15 years of teaching is where the darkness comes from. Both staff, dealing with staff and pupils. So that's where, easy answer. That
You
one.
needed an outlet, didn't you? Really?
Yeah, definitely, yeah. And I haven't even got round to writing the books that I could write about school.
I feel like to answer that question, I'd have to actually lie down on this chaise lawn and go through some therapy. I'm not sure where the darkness comes from. But it's a good way of getting it out. I think that most crime writers are really nice people, maybe because we get all the nastiness out on the page.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can attest. I've been in the green room with them. It's safe to be with them. And should say if you do wish for a book to be signed, you'll be fine.
With me as
Yeah. So, time for one more question. I think. Is there anybody else would like to ask a question? If not, I have one. Am I allowed one last one? Is that okay? I wanted to come back to the notion of how in your book, Keep a Secret, this idea of Matthew is willing to do whatever it takes.
Yeah.
And I was thinking of the Meatloaf song, I would do anything for love, but I won't do that. And I just wondered, that sense of, because we've established that you're really nice people. Yeah, okay. Yeah, gruesome authors, but really nice people. Would you, moral dilemma, how far would you go to protect a loved one when you knew, because of course there is a grim secret there, or are you morally upstanding and it would be no, the police have to know about this?
I think if you were in that situation where you're kind of almost bewitched by somebody and you're really in love with them and you feel that actually what they did was the right thing for them to do at the time, and that's kind of important in the book.
Yeah.
Then you will go to any lengths to try and help them. I thought you were going to ask what wouldn't you do in your book? What one thing would you not do in your book?
I always like to get it even more personal with the author. Should we make it easy, Louise? What wouldn't you do? What wouldn't you do in your book?
I would never kill a dog.
That's what I was going to say. Well, I was going to say a cat.
Just don't do it because it's just not worth it. It's really not worth it. Don't even injure a dog.
However, if again to bring it back to this thing, if the killing of the dog were necessary to protect that beloved, would the dog get sacrificed?
Well, I think you would just get, talk about 1-star reviews, you would say
You'd have
there's
so
no
many 1-star
justification.
reviews. Could not finish the book because the dog was hurt.
Yeah.
Throw it away, I would try to find a way to save both dog and person is what I would do. Yes.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. Everybody, please, Louise Mumford and Mark Edwards. And we did it just this time. Thank you so much.